Hey, this is Quincy with Cuyahoga Falls Church of the Nazarene. I've got a video study guide for you from season 4, episode 3 of The Chosen. The Chosen is a free TV series about the life of Jesus. You can find it for free on the Chosen app. You can also eventually find it on many of your streaming platforms, favorite streaming platforms, and then you can find live streams on social media platforms as well. It's a great series talking about the life of Jesus from Scripture, but I want to note that if you haven't seen season 4, episode 3, don't watch any further because there's some fairly big spoilers here. This episode opens with a little bit of a lengthy intro. This is the story of David, and you can find David in this story in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 15 through 23. This is David as he fasts and prays that God would spare his infant son. This is the son that was born to David and Bathsheba as a result of the infidelity that David committed against Bathsheba's husband, Uzziah. And this is the child that was a result of that. We know from the story that this child dies, and David fasts for 6 days. As soon as the child dies, David gets up, he eats and drinks and washes his face. And questions result as to why David isn't mourning after his son dies. And David says, "Why would I mourn when my son has been taken from me? I will go to him, but he will not return to me." The show develops this idea a little bit, has Bathsheba struggling and saying, "Why do some prayers work and not others? You still worship even though you don't understand why God doesn't answer your prayers." And David saying, "This is the meaning of faith, that we can trust that when we don't understand, there is still a plan beyond what we know, and we can walk in obedience, knowing that someday we'll see our child again." And then we just go right into the episode. So it tells you that the show wants you to think about these ideas. And I thought the show did a great job with this. I like that the show had David's helpers pointing out how brutal David's reign as a king was and that people would be killed for various things. Certainly true, but here we see David's tender heart towards God, his desire that he would be repentant and found a right relationship with God, and the care that he exercises for his son, who is tragically taken from them at this early age. And certainly, anyone who watches this episode who has experienced the loss of a baby or known someone who has lost a baby or even a miscarriage can hear the grief in Bathsheba's voice, the grief in David's actions in this episode, and begin to think about those losses that make no sense, those innocent lives that we see lost around us. How do we make sense of a loving God who allows these things to happen? And the episode wants you to think about those things. And I think that's great. It's great that The Chosen is willing to ask these kind of questions that are oftentimes not really asked in Christian art. We then see Quintus rampaging as he deals with the fallout of Atticus saying, Atticus, the military intelligence agent from Rome, saying that he's about to lose his position of authority. So Quintus takes out his anger on Gaius, setting us up for some stuff later in the episode. Also, setting us up for stuff later in the season, James and John have a conversation with their father Zebedee and mother Salome about the position of authority that Peter seems to have, and whether they should be jockeying for some more privileges and ruling power in Jesus' new order that he's creating. Salome quoting from the Sermon on the Mount saying, "Hey, ask and it will be given to you. That's what you should be doing." And interesting to think about this in context of the rest of the episode, where we see that Jesus doesn't always answer prayers that seem to make a lot of sense. Thomas is then seen in a real cute scene proposing to Rama. The show's writers do a good job presenting an adorable love story and two people who are just filled with the right kind of love for each other and wanting to spend their life together and follow Jesus together. Some funny lines here, some beautiful lines that I lose track of time every time I'm with you. And then I like how the show gives you these moments where you don't quite see or hear everything you want to hear, as Rama shares Eden's advice about being married to a follower of Jesus with Thomas off screen. And we wonder what that advice might be. Now, the rabbis in Capernaum have heard from Jerusalem that Jesus is a heretic and a blasphemer, and anyone who confesses him must be put out of the synagogue. That's found in John 9:22, that edict coming from Jerusalem. And Jesus' response is immediately to go and heal on the Sabbath. I love how the show presents that as something that Jesus does almost in kind of a showing up the Pharisees kind of way with a sense of humor about it. I totally think that when it's Sabbath, Jesus is like, wow, must be time to heal somebody, because he likes to go against the rules that are oppressing God's people and preventing God's people from experiencing the fullness of what God has to offer them in the Sabbath and this rest that he's created for his people. So Jesus goes and heals a man born blind. This whole scene takes place in John chapter 9. I've always wanted to see this, one of my favorite chapters in all scriptures, portrayed well on film, and The Chosen did it. This is just an amazing scene from top to bottom. As a side note, Barnaby keeps showing up in these episodes, and I love his character. He's such an encouragement to people, and I do wonder if maybe someday Barnaby is Barnabas, who mentors Saul, who is the son of encouragement and one of the early Christian leaders in the church. Possibly. As soon as Jesus heals Uzziah, the man born blind, the crowd says, we want to see another miracle. And this is what Jesus has been working with when he says, don't tell anyone about the miracles that I've done, because he wants people to listen to his message and not just see him as some sort of superhero miracle worker. So Jesus begins to talk to the people, and we see a woman cry out, blessed is the womb that bore you. And Jesus saying, blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey it. And that's found in Luke 11:27 through 28. And in Luke, we understand the context of Luke, Jesus saying, this is why my mom is blessed. Not that she gave birth to me, not that she's a mom, but that in that process, she was saying yes to God's message to her through the angel, who said, you will bear God's son. And Mary said, may it be to me as God has said. That's how we are all meant to live our lives. So I enjoy how the show brought that out. Jesus quotes Luke 8:17, an evil generation seeks a sign. Jesus goes back to Luke 11:39 through 53 and Matthew 23 as he speaks against the Pharisees here. We see the Pharisees who are upset because of the conversation they just had with Uzziah, which again is super well done. I love how Jairus fist pumps when Uzziah says, one thing I know, I was blind, but now I see. What a great expression of faith that the church has used for years to describe what Jesus does in our lives. And the Pharisees don't know what to do with it. And all of a sudden, as Jesus directly confronts the Pharisees, he's not pulling any punches here. He's telling them exactly what they need to hear. And the Pharisees get more and more upset. And as the crowd gets more and more riled up, we see Gaius just standing back, and he's making a play for Quintus's job. And Atticus quickly recognizes that after sending a message to Quintus to get out there, he recognizes what Gaius is doing and he respects it, but says, I'm going to keep my eye on the situation. Both Gaius and Atticus recognize that Capernaum would probably be in a better place without the volatile Quintus in charge. And it's a complicated moment for viewers of the show, because this is not necessarily an honest thing that Gaius is doing, but we do know that Gaius probably has care for Jesus at the heart of what he's trying to accomplish here. It's a complicated world we live in, and the Chosen does a good job trying to present that. As Quintus orders Jesus to be arrested, Thomas tells Rama to get out. Rama refuses to do that. She wants to stay there with Thomas. Now, there's an awkward moment here, I think, for the scriptwriters, the stage directors, so to speak, as Thomas tries to exit with Rama and kind of brushes past Quintus. I can't imagine a scenario where a Jewish peasant would brush into a Roman ruler like this. And if it happened, they wouldn't be surprised if they were killed. So I don't really think the show executed that part particularly well, when the idea here is that Quintus kind of just lashes out and accidentally kills Rama out of rage. But of course, this is the big moment of the show, as Rama is stabbed and falls to the ground and dies. And Atticus arrests Quintus, and we eventually see the consequences of that in episodes to come. Jesus has already been ushered out of the scene, but he, as he is leaving, hears the cry of pain, maybe from Mary Magdalene, maybe from Thomas, and turns back. Now, I did see in a recent after show that Dallas Jenkins, the creator of the show, said that Jesus wasn't actually there when Rama dies. That's incorrect. He actually is there as she dies, as she takes her last breaths. And that was a particular decision that the show made, to have Jesus be there and not intervene to save her life. I think it is powerful to hear Rama share here what I'm assuming we're meant to understood that Eden shared with her, saying, Thomas, remember what I said, stay with him. It's all I want. And that Eden's saying that any sacrifice I can make to help my husband Peter stay with Jesus is a sacrifice I will make. And that's the advice she gives to Rama. Man, what a powerful thing for Christian spouses everywhere, for those whose spouses are called to ministry and mission. Say, whatever it takes to follow Jesus, I will make those sacrifices with you. And here we see that Rama has made the ultimate sacrifice. Now, the show does an incredible job with this scene. Whether or not we think they should have included this scene, I think we should acknowledge how well they do with Thomas and Rama in this scene. Rama's quiet acceptance over what has happened as well as pain, but Thomas saying to Jesus, heal her, fix this. This is a mistake. Take it back. Every single one of us who have been in a situation that someone we love, someone innocent, someone pure and good in this world is taken from us unexpectedly, or maybe even expectedly, after a long battle for which we prayed for healing and healing hasn't come, can resonate with what Thomas says in this scene and the emotion that we hear in his voice. Incredibly well acted and written. And I love that the show is now willing to ask a question that is oftentimes absent in Christian art. If you watch the movie Silence from Martin Scorsese, if you watch Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life, if you watch the Coen Brothers A Serious Man, all those movies do try to ask the questions like, why is faithfulness to God sometimes rewarded with pain and suffering? This woman who has left everything to follow Jesus, who calls her substitute father and her rabbi and her teacher, she is dying at Jesus' feet, and Jesus is standing almost impassively. Like, he does show emotion, he does seem on the verge of tears. He looks up to heaven for a minute. He says, I am so sorry. I love you. He loves you. I'm so sorry. But he's not intervening, and he's not crying out to God and saying, God, Father, why don't you let this cup pass from her and heal her? He's not saying, Thomas, my soul cries out with you. He's standing there. And I was so upset by that when I first saw the scene, but then I realized that many people, that is their experience when incredible suffering and pain and loss hits. They just don't understand why Jesus is seemingly just standing there. They can't see the full plan. As David talks to Bathsheba at the beginning of the episode, this is what faith is about. This is the meaning of faith. Being faithful to Jesus, even when he is not the superhero, the comic book superstar, the miracle worker that we want him to be, and trusting him to walk down paths that we cannot ever imagine being asked to walk, from the loss of a child, to the loss of a spouse, to the loss of a parent, to the loss of a sibling, to the wars and violence that goes on throughout the world. This scene speaks to us to say we can trust Jesus. We have to trust Jesus. He is going to pour out love and life and redemption in the most impossible of places. And I love that the show is willing to have that conversation. So, despite some quibbles and criticisms and wonderings here and there, it's just incredible the amount of depth that this decision that the writers made and that was acted out by the all those associated with the show. It's the depth that this is going to bring to Thomas's journey, to the disciples' journey, to Judas as he wonders what it means to follow Jesus when losses begin to rack up, to all of us as followers of Jesus to say, what are we really in this for? And what does it mean to stay faithful to Jesus when we don't get what we want?